welcome, and I want to thank you all for coming out to hear our bit of an announcement. I'd like to thank you all so much for taking the time to come here and listen to some of the things that we are looking to advance on behalf of all African Canadians. Let me start by giving you just a bit of perspective and a history on this. The Canadian Congress of Black Parliamentarians began in 2015. The idea came about through a casual conversation between myself and MP Michael Cotto. At that time, he was a minister of the Ontario government, and Michael is representing Don Valley East. Michael and I were sharing some conversations over Black history and some of the history of in Nova Scotia, the Black history in Nova Scotia. I had provided him a book on the Colored Hockey League of the Maritimes. At that point, through the conversation, he pulls out his phone and begins to Google. And he Googled and found that at that time, in 2015, that there were approximately federally and provincially 20 of us elected. We were surprised by that. He said, wouldn't it be great if we could all come together and have conversations that actually look at the issues we face as African Canadians? Well, I left that meeting. I said, that's done. I left that meeting. I came home. I spoke to Premier McNeil, and he said, Tony, good idea. You can start it on this end. So we got together, and that's the history of this organization. We've had a number of meetings since then, one in 2016, which was in Toronto, another one in 2017, which was in Ottawa. The fourth was 2019, just prior to COVID, here in Nova Scotia, and there was only about 12 members at that time. And we've come together today, most recently in August, 9th to the 11th, 2023, we had a meeting in Ottawa, and that meeting had 45 Black politicians from across Canada come together, and we committed in that meeting on a national dialogue through an integrated approach, which includes all levels of government, academia, and aiming to improve educational and healthcare systems. We're also targeting enhancing community engagement and economic development. That's a bit of that. I will like to turn it over to one of my colleagues here and let them share how this meeting impacted them or their thoughts on the meeting. And I'll start with Mr. Diwali.
Good morning, all of you. Thank you for coming. Quite honest, this was an historic time in Canada to have 45 elected officials across Canada who came together for one purpose: how we can enrich our communities, how we can make our country a better place for all of us. And we achieved that goal. Secondly, I took away that gathering, even though we do have a three level of government in this country, but also the possibility of being the same page and the possibility of working together what is the best interest of our people. Thirdly, I was pleased and I was grateful to meet people across Canada who have a different background, different way of life, but also made a personal relationship and personal connection. That's my experience. Thank you.
Ms. Hanson.
So I would like to say that it was a monumental moment, history in the making, and only for us to get bigger and better, to think about how we can come together, how we can collectively have conversations about what's going on in our Black communities, for African, in particular African Nova Scotians, but as well all African Canadians. What I took from the meeting was that across the nation, Black Canadians are experiencing similar issues, and a lot of it stems from systemic racism and how the system was not designed for many folks in these types of communities. So I just want to say that I was extremely happy and proud to be among my colleagues, but as well to meet new members that have like and similar positions, and for us to all collectively talk about the things that are happening in our communities that affect Black Canadians across the nation. I am looking forward to our continued collaborations, and as well our meetings. We will be meeting quarterly to have discussions on what is working in each of our respective areas, some of the legislation that has already been put forward that we can all pull from and look at together, and as well to foster relationships so that we can continue engaging our communities and showing them that there is representation across Canada.
Ms. Stoddard.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. Much appreciated. As the first Black counselor in HRM history, I was very proud to be a part of this 45-member group from all levels of government across Canada. I represent District 12, but all of HRM as well. I will work closely with the other members, and I do work closely with other women of color, MLA Rafa DiConstanzo and Lena Metlich-Diab. So all three levels of government are saying what is needed to be in the Black and community of color to be the best group we can, working collaboratively. And that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Mr. McNeely.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gordon McNeely. I'm MLA in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. So I'm from Prince Edward Island. I'm the first person of color ever elected in Prince Edward Island's history. And this is my second term. I'm with the Liberal Party over in Prince Edward Island. And very proud to champion a lot of, do what I can to champion a lot of different files and make this a very much an Atlantic conference. And it's funny, in Prince Edward Island, we often look to Nova Scotia to see what you've done. Even though you have your struggles and they continue to exist, we are just a smaller version potentially of the same things that happen. And the Black communities are, I often say they suffer in silence. If there's a housing crisis, it disproportionately affects the Black communities. Healthcare, mental health, and various same things, cultural integration. So I believe in equity, and in the document that was released, we said as a group, we will be steadfast as we seek equity for Black communities, and that to me is something that I'm proud. I feel like I'm joining my family, and I can't wait to work on these important issues together. And thanks for your leadership, all of you, and Prince Edward Island. We're here, we're strong, and we have a lot of the same issues, and we will continue to push government and push anybody that will listen to strengthen the community voices in our community.
Thank you. I would also like to just add that what was amazing for me was that we all came together with the same consensus. We jointly affirmed our commitment to capacity building and working together for the communities and working to ensure that we're engaging our communities so that their voices will be heard. I'd also like to take a moment here to thank my co-chairs, Michael Cotto from Don Valley East, and Matthew Green, who is from Hamilton Center. With that, I'll leave it open for any questions that you folks may have.
Susie, you mentioned that there are a number of issues that you think are shared. Can you give us a concrete example of one issue that you think is at the fore right now in communities across the country?
Absolutely, thank you for the question. One of the main issues was housing. Housing and homelessness was huge across the nation. I don't think anyone at the table that when we were discussing things in August, they all discussed that housing was a huge issue, especially in our marginalized communities and communities in which a lot of services aren't available. So that was top of mind. Housing and then healthcare would have been the second or close to.
So when it comes to housing, does the Black community experience the problem differently than, say, other communities? Is there something unique that you think is at work?
Well, I think when it comes down to it, it's affordability, and that's, everywhere, but as well, we were specifically talking about Black communities and African Canadian communities, and that was one of those pieces. Affordability, we know the rising costs of everything is happening, and people are just trying to make ends meet, and at the cost of our housing right now, some people just can't do that.
What about the issue of home ownership and allowing Black communities to
Absolutely, and those barriers, thank you for that as well. Those barriers do exist a lot. It's a higher number, as you know, to be able to attain home ownership in the Black communities, typically because, we don't, a lot of folks don't have that generational wealth, and they don't actually have the accesses to be able to obtain that. And like I said, with the rising costs of everything, it's even more harder to do.
Studies have shown that marginalized communities such as the Black community are at a greater disadvantage in healthcare, which is obviously this provincial government has said that that's their priority. What specifically does your group want to do to address that issue for your communities?
Well, one of the things I'd like to acknowledge and mention is we really discussed disaggregated data. That data will help us really look towards the answers and look for some of the solutions that possibly could help us improve healthcare outcomes for the Black community.
I just want to also add to that is that there was an amendment put forward that was put forward in the bill that is existing now, the Dismantling Hate and Racism bill. There was an amendment put forward to have disaggregated race-based data, and that was not acknowledged by this government. So we will continue to push for what we know is the facts and show that truth within the data that we're able to collect moving forward.
So without that data, it's difficult to quantify exactly how extensive the problem is?
Absolutely. Yes. We know that data is being collected. I don't want to disregard that. There is data that's being collected, but we want to actually see it, a real time, knowing exactly what's happening so that we can drill in to what communities need, what the communities need the most. And communities that we've talked to know what they need. They're just calling to the province to ask. This is what we need in particular, diabetes, healthcare, hypertension, all of these things that we know that exist in our Black communities. It's just the province to act on that. So we'll continue to push for that.
It's not just Nova Scotia. When we were at the conference, one of the topics that we stayed on was sickle cell anemia. It presents differently for our communities. So we need more education. We need more funding for education because blood work presents differently, and doctors need that support. And I've already talked to Health PEI about it, and they're very interested in it. So it's things like that that we're exploring, and to hear that on a national level, and to make sure that we're ready as in the Atlantic provinces for things like that.
One more thing that I'd just like to follow up for your previous question. As you know, the struggle of the Black people is not one or two. It's a collective struggle, and another issue that was arise was education. And everything in life based on education and knowledge. And this was another issue that was at the top of the mind, and it was the issue that being raised every corner of the country, every constituency. And I think also we know the struggle of our community, specifically when it comes to education. It's well known. and specifically in this province, there's no one single identifiable in our curriculum in Nova Scotia school system, even though we have one of the oldest African Nova Scotians in this province specifically. So those are some of the issues. So, even though you choose to identify one issue, but also the struggle of our community is every single aspect of life.
Mr. McNeil, I wanted to ask you maybe about the housing issue that we talked about a little bit. I'm wondering on PEI, if you can elaborate on that, what it looks like for Black communities there.
Yeah, well, in Prince Edward Island, there's going back, and there is a history there that maybe Nova Scotia doesn't realize. But recently, we have an increasing diverse community that's coming to Prince Edward Island for work, for school. We have two institutions, main institutions that have a lot of diversity: Holland College and UPEI. We have a massive housing crisis within Prince Edward Island. I'm the housing critic over there for my party, and there's no place for people to live. So if there's no place for people to live, you get the diverse communities scrambling, and they're always more or less last. Like I said, if there's a housing crisis, it disproportionately affects people of color, and it just does. So I'm seeing that's become an issue. In Charlottetown, we had UPI students staying in Cornwall and being bussed in, and just it's just there's major gaps. And I think housing, low-income housing, needs to be built by our province and supported. And this is an issue that will last, because we can't talk about diversity and not do the things around supporting the growth of a diverse community, and that's what I'm all about. So it takes planning at a government level, and to this point, the planning, in my opinion, has been poor, at least in my province.
Are there any other issues at the forefront that you can relate to, maybe here in the Maritimes, that's across the country?
Yeah, well, there's housing, there's mental health concerns. During COVID, if you look back to some of the cases that were magnified a little bit in our media, they revolved around people of color not being able to understand or see some of the rules, being caught, and then it blows up. This happened on a couple different occasions, and it just wasn't fair, because you have somebody that doesn't understand society, just shifted on them, and the communication wasn't there. So the mental health concerns, that's a major thing. Equity, we don't, in Prince Edward Island, we've never had a minister, a deputy minister, and directors in our province. So how do we get that change to happen without equity, without giving people the additional leg up? So I'm always talking about equity, and it being something that our community, they need to be at least given the opportunity to see those positions and be successful, and that's what I'm all about in Prince Edward Island for my community.
I note that the new MLA for Preston is going to be there. Is she going to be part of this in the future, or why was she not here today?
Actually, just newly elected. We are here to support her. We congratulate her, and we are looking to have some communications and future dialogue with her in the very near future. Just newly elected, not being a part of this conference, that's the only reason why.
You mentioned quarterly. Is that going to be representatives here in this region, or is that a national meeting quarterly?
National.
That's going to be national, and we've decided in our meeting also that we would attempt to do the same here.
So you'd be piggybacking on the national meeting with a sort of a breakout regional meeting?
Sorry, say again?
I said you'd be piggybacking on the national gathering to do a breakout regional meeting at the same time?
Yes, and quite honestly, every jurisdiction across Canada is tasked with doing the same.
I'm not very good at math. The last one was in August. When would the next one be if you're doing it?
Probably December.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. We just had a good conversation inside. We're going to get together as much as we can, and I'm offering to host my colleagues in the first one in Charlottetown in late November, and let them see the legislature when it's in, and meet over there and discuss some important issues. So I extend that invitation to my colleagues.
I'd like to go back to the homeless issue. I will be looking at the numbers of homeless, especially how it affects the Black community, and looking at the numbers to see if there is any representation or any noticeable Black people that outnumber or are under or even to the numbers that we have now in our HRM. Housing is an issue for all people in HRM, but I'd like to focus on the number of Black people so that I can get an idea of exactly the percentage, and that's something I'll be looking at right away. Thank you.
So just talk about housing. I know that like here in Halifax, you're looking, say, for an apartment, you can go on to Facebook Marketplace or to Gigi, and there's rules listed there that say like no discrimination, and I mean these apartments go quick. But if somebody doesn't want to rent to a Black person, I mean, there's nothing really preventing them from doing that, which I would assume is something that affects the housing price for Black people. How does a municipal government or a provincial government or a federal government help alleviate or prevent that, or can it? I mean, if I'm, just to reiterate, if I'm renting a place on Facebook and I want to rent to somebody Black, I'm just not going to it. There's a bunch of people who are practicing that same thing. Is that something that's come up in your meetings? Is it something that maybe you can't do?
Well, no, I think that's a really good point. I mean, it comes back to some of the things that were talked about around the table nationwide is, you know, an equity framework. And I mean, when we think about what we do as legislators, we would like to see some legislation put forward that includes that type of work so then we can kind of see, you know, and we can prevent those things from happening. And that would go within the Residential Tenancies Act or, you know, a number of acts that we can kind of, you know, take a look at and see how we can change those things and add amendments or make some changes to that, but it would essentially on our end would be legislation. And I was thinking that, you know, having an equity framework on all of our pieces of legislation, having that lens looked at from all aspects, so we could gather that information to know who's being, you know, disproportionately, you know, excluded from, you know, these types of conversations, or in particular in housing, and working from there. So on our end, legislative wise, it would be something on that frame, but. I don't know what the municipal government on that end would look at.
I'd have to refer to the province on that because it is a housing issue, and as said, the equity framework will take a look at all of that to make equality, you know, a better place, and so that we can get the numbers from the province to see where we have to action. Thank you.
And I might add to that to give you a PEI perspective. We just, talking about renting to is one thing, but actually when people get into apartments is another thing that landlords can't discriminate against. Just in PEI, the anti-racism position there, and I were working together. The Residential Tenancy Act just came up just last year, huge debate on it. I pushed his advice forward, and we got an amendment to the RTA to make sure that people can leave a situation if they so choose because they've been discriminated against. It has to be done through the Human Rights Commission, but it was a clause in the RTA, and it wasn't easy to get into that. I don't think the government really wanted to do it. We got it in, and it's something that you might look at for your RTA too. So we have to look at that, and we have to consciously, as Black politicians, look at those gaps and make sure we're there to make amendments to important legislations that come forward.
Who's, between municipal, provincial, and federal, who would hold the most responsibility in that? Do you think, or is that?
Well, that's a work in progress, and there is so much work that we need to do, so that would be part of the dialogue and discussion as well. Looking to see, ideally, or not ideally, but we all know that right now, most of the legislation around housing is provincial right now.
And just to follow that, I think this is the beauty of this organization, have the capacity actually who can bring together three different levels of government. And this could be an example across Canada, any topic on any issue. So this is the beginning of a future that can actually lay out how three levels of government can work together, issues that are actually affecting their communities one way or the other. So this is one of the things that I'm actually grateful to see. This kind of ideas can flourish, and it can become actually an example, different issues and different topics and different reasons. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
As black politicians and legislators, just you alone, there's so many firsts up here, and it speaks to the progress perhaps we're making. But I'm wondering, on the flip side of that, what barriers remain for black people that want to enter politics, or what challenges, what needs to change? I don't know if everyone wants to take it.
Well, I've mentioned in the meeting in Ottawa, I said one of the challenges that we have is most of our communities are disengaged. Most of our communities don't have faith in the system. Most of our communities think that we're not truthful and unbecoming. So I think we need to lead by example. And I think the first step was really that challenge of all of us coming together, all of us coming to a consensus on 5 points, which you can imagine in any room, that's not an easy thing to do. So it left me walking away feeling more positive because everybody was, again, I'll state, was tasked with going back to their own areas, their regions, and making sure that they were engaged, making sure that they were informing and educating the population, not just the black population, but all of our roles. Often, I may talk to people, and I often refer to this statement that 95% of my job is explaining my job. So, you know, and that goes through all communities. They have no real idea of jurisdiction, who does what, and quite honestly, I think politically, those of us who sit in these seats for the last 150 years have been doing a disservice to the population, and I believe that disengagement only really works for a certain segment of the population. So until we do better, get out there and engage with people and show them that they have a voice here, we're going to continue to see this disengagement.
Just to, along the lines of municipal government, I found that it was a struggle when I had to campaign door to door, not only being as a woman, but also being as a black woman. I had a lot of challenges. One of the areas in District 12, their voting was down to less than 5%, and it was because, as I concur with MLA, it was because, again, the trust level. They just figured, well, why vote? It's just another number, and it's not going to do anything for my situation. So it was a struggle, and it will continue to be, and I think education is one of the key points that we need to make.
I just want to also say that my experience, and I mean, I think the reason why it was so wonderful, empowering, being in a room with 45 other legislators, other, you know, politicians per se, is that we all had similar experiences, no matter how long we've been in the position, whether we were a senator, whether it was a school board trustee, whether it was municipal, provincial, federal, right? I think our experiences as black politicians and people who are elected officials, we experience things differently when it comes to politics. Either getting into the running, being in the position, and as well our treatment while we're here. Grateful to be able to be connected to colleagues that have similar experiences that can help uplift and also inspire. And I think that's for me personally, the role in which where I sit is to inspire others to do this work. Because yes, it is not an easy job and it is quite challenging, but the reward is that you're helping folks and you're also educating and engaging folks in community to be able to step forward and do that work. So we were hoping that through our collective and there's a number of us, there's over 1,000 black parliamentarians. So if we were to spread our voices and have these conversations about, you know, what this looks like for us, but as well to support others that might want to run, it will also alleviate some of that. But we are in 2023, and there are a lot of firsts here up here at that table, but that also is a testament to why we need to continue doing the work that we do. So, yeah, I think, you know, it's just a positive note on that.
Yeah, I think for me, we're heading the right direction, and I'm very optimistic. As you know, in this province, this is the first time we have 4 elected officials and 3 different parties. And also, when you look even the national level, that number did not exist 10 years ago across Canada. And I really believe, you know, even though we should not have at this time and age the first of this and the first of this and the first of this, nevertheless, it is something to be celebrated. And that shows us we as a nation, we're heading in the right direction. Yes, we do have history, but also we have a future.
PEI perspective, we just came off an election in April, and we had, I think, 6 people of color or black people run, and I know one of my good friends ran for another party, and that's fantastic. I went out and I worked so hard to try to get people to the point of putting their name on the ballot. And I guess I just want to say it's not that scary, and this is the best job I could ever imagine. And we need your voice, and you don't have to be ready, you just have to be engaged. And if you're engaged in the community and engaged in what you want to do, go for it. But it's hard and it's scary, and we understand that, and you can't do it unless you have support. So, I mean, when I ran, I watched, Tony doesn't know this, but I watched Tony from afar, and he inspired me, and seeing the great people at this table. It's possible, go after it. I know it's scary, but you'll be more excited about doing that. Win or lose, it doesn't matter.
The rewarding aspect of being the first is that I am able to give a hand up to the next person of color or black that would choose to run for municipal, provincial, or federal positions. So there will be a second and a third and a fourth, and it won't just end with me. Thank you.
Susan, I think the term you guys talk about in your national meeting, sort of like comparing notes and things like that, with respect to bills and legislation. Was there anything that stood out that maybe you guys took from other jurisdictions and said, maybe we should try that? Maybe people looked at you and said, oh, we should try that. Any major things like that that stood out in terms of like bills and legislation?
Well, we had such a short time, 3 days, to kind of drill down 5 topics, 5 major topics that we wanted to tackle. So, I mean, as Tony said earlier, it was quite challenging because the first 2 days were really like immersed in issues and things that were happening and what we could, you know, bring to the table. So what I would say is that we didn't talk about bills specifically, but we did say that through our time and through our meetings, we would share that information to see what is working nationwide and what, you know, what they've utilized and how we can kind of take from that and maybe present it to each of our prospective caucuses to see how we could do that work. So that was what we shared the most, was our personal experience, some of the things that were happening across the nation, and collecting that information to kind of put forward some key points that we wanted to tackle within the next short timeline before we meet and then collectively talk again.
This isn't so much a bill, but the impact of race culture assessment of that is made mandatory. Lots of work, but I think the courts here in Nova Scotia. Is there anything that maybe you had in mind you want to put forth to people in other jurisdictions in the next meeting, say you guys should try it? Maybe
There's a host of things. Nova Scotia has set the benchmark on many levels for many things. You know, we've got the Cultural Action Plan that was put in place, a number of things that, and there's so much that we can share. Again, most people across the country, especially out west, most of them are newly elected and represented. So there's a lot more work to do, a lot more conversations. What I'm really excited about is the fact that collectively we can come together, and we're here to support each other from this end of the country to the other end of the country. If there's an issue in BC and they're looking for suggestions or some ideas of how to cope or deal with that particular issue, they know they can reach out to any one of us to help support or give some or share some of those ideas.
So to your point, I just want to also say that, you know, it's still August. We literally just finished the session, and so it is still fresh. We have a ton of ideas, I know each of us, to really kind of bring back and kind of gather information. So I think within the next few months, we'll have an idea of some of the things that we want to kind of put forward. But for right now, it's just been a whirlwind of a number of topics and issues that have been happening that we want to kind of pull from what we have here in Nova Scotia.
I want to thank Nova Scotia, because if Nova Scotia hadn't done the work on Emancipation Day, that legislation passed. But in Prince Edward Island 2 years ago, I was able to bring on the Black Culture Society CEO and myself, and we passed Emancipation Day celebration. So that we took from your legislation. So we were able to do that. Another thing that in Prince Edward Island, outside of legislation, this session I'm pushing for an inclusion commissioner. An inclusion commissioner that's it's directly under the Legislative Assembly in Prince Edward Island. We have a child advocate, we have an ombudsperson, and I'm pushing for an inclusion commissioner that could look and investigate outside of government racism, systemic racism, issues that we need, and become a voice for education. So that's a big position in Prince Edward Island, and that's what I'm working on over there.
The photos on this wall are of past Nova Scotia premiers. Do you think we're going to see blackface on that wall in our lifetime?
I hope to.
I hope so.
I hope so too.
No reason
Yes.
why not.
Yes.
I'll say yes. I think we're optimistic. And I think the testimony is this stable.
Yeah.
And we need to have a patient. As I said earlier, we do have history, but we do have a future. So to answer your question, I'm very optimistic, and I think we as a society, we as the Nova Scotians, we could do this.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming out. Thank you for asking the questions. Any of us are available if you have any additional questions. Look forward to seeing you all in the near future and doing a follow-up on our meeting in November in PEI.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Do you have dates for that?
Not yet.
No.
Is your meeting for today concluded?
Our meeting is concluded for
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you want to?
You want to congratulate for the new member?
Yeah.
For the public?
And again, I'll take a moment because my colleagues are reminding me. Again, we would like to congratulate Twyla Gross for the position of Preston, MLA for Preston. We are excited, and we're looking forward to meeting with her and having some conversations and sharing with her the outcome of this last national meeting. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Okay, sure.
Community Update is brought to you with the support of the following organizations, businesses and individuals: Heritage Canada, Canadian Association of Community Television Users and Stations, Cactus, Bailey-O, M4 Media, Flenjor Foods, Sheyi Ajetamobi, and Shokoto.